Ladies and gentlemen, from the depths of flyover country in the heartland of America, the Kansas City on the other side of the mighty Mo, home of the 2023 World Champion Kansas City Chiefs, welcome to Hittin the Bricks with Kathleen, the genealogy show that features your questions and her answers. I am John, your humble hubby host, and on this episode, we'll be talking to Vickie Cook from the Grand Canyon State, the great state of Arizona. So let's start hitting the bricks.
So, John, we are all set, Vickie and I.
I wanted to ask a little bit, if I could, where is Snowflake, Arizona? Is that where you're from?
Yeah, well, I'm from Tulsa, but I've lived here almost 20 years.
From Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Arizona. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, northern Arizona, about 100 miles or so from Flagstaff. A lot of people, when you've traveled across country, you run into Flagstaff on I-40.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've done the Flagstaff run. In fact, I think what happened was we were traveling, one of our first vacations, we went out, this goes all the way back to the AAA book and the Ring Baloney from the first
I love
episode.
The Ring Baloney.
Yeah, so we went out and actually we drove, I think, through Flagstaff, and then we drove south, I think, to Phoenix. And then we were planning on going back through Flagstaff, but Flagstaff got like 9 feet of snow overnight.
It was bad.
And so we had to take the southern route back to Kansas. We didn't have a choice. So I'll let Kathleen, you and Vickie have already chit-chatted about this. What are we talking about today?
I don't know, Vickie. Why don't you tell us? Well, I do know, but I'm going to have Vickie.
I have no idea why I came here this
no
morning.
idea why I'm here.
Well, I'm looking for my great-grandmother's maiden name. I've looked for years and I've never been able to find it. I've found a couple of references to where she was born, and that's really about it.
So we're looking for your great-grandmother's name.
My great-grandmother.
See, I'm getting better at this.
Nice.
I know, right? Vickie, tell us a little bit about what you know about your great-grandmother.
Well, I know she lived in Cherokee Nation Indian Territory. I think she was born sometime between 1867 and 1871, but I've seen her name on a couple of census records, one showing Arkansas as the state that she was born in, and another stating, I believe, Indian Territory. So that's about all I know.
So do you know anything about her husband?
Very little with him as well. I know he was born in Indian Territory. I know his mother's name.
And what is his name?
His name is James Carr. His mother was Rachel Graves. Well, she had several names. Apparently, she was married a few times, but I think she was a Van as well. And that's another concern. I've seen it spelled several ways on the census records, from K-A-N to K-E-R-R, and oh gosh, a couple other names. Spellings as well.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's phonetics and sometimes it's bad indexing.
Right.
And sometimes it's poor writing by the census or the census takers. So your question is, why can't I find my great-grandmother's maiden name? And your great-grandmother, we know her name was Ellen, and she was married to Jim Carr. Have you found any kind of a marriage record?
No.
And there's a reason for that, of course. I mean, we're talking early in Oklahoma. You did mention Cherokee Indian Territory. And early in Oklahoma, of course, we didn't have the marriage records for any non-whites until later. So they would have been married too early. But when do you think they were married?
My best estimate is around 1890 or so.
They were actually married around 1898.
Really?
But I'm going to back you up. You're looking for a female's maiden name. What we do know is we can't go to the female because we already don't know who she is. We just know her name is Ellen. We know she has a lot of children. You see her on census records, I believe in the 1900 and the 1910 you sent me. I don't know if you have others.
I believe up to 1920.
By the 1930s, we see James as a widow.
Right.
So we can assume she's deceased by then, but we don't have any kind of death record or death information on her. This is a very fun project, but you are going to have to start back at the gate.
Okay.
One thing that I learned about Ellen, somebody who married James Carr, is that she had been married twice. Did you see that?
Yes.
So those first two children are not James Carr's.
Oh, wow.
If you do what we call a census analysis, which is what I did, starting with 1890 census, where we first see James Carr, he's 14 years old and he's in the Cherokee Nation. He's with all of Rachel's people, right? The Beans and the Vans and all of Rachel's people, as you mentioned. As we follow him in 1900 and 1910, we see that he's still in the Cherokee Nation area. It was the 1900 census and the 1910 that explains about the time they got married. And those two agree with one another. In 1910, it tells you that they've only been married about 11 years. And in 1900, they tell you they've only been married about 2. So they got married somewhere around 1898. Okay. It tells us also that she lost a child, not George and Lizzie, but there's a third child. We don't know when that child was born. Her oldest child, actually with James, was Rachel. Okay. And Rachel was born somewhere
1903.
Yes. Now, all the way down, there's all these children that you have attached to her because they're in the house.
Right.
But again, remember, we don't know Lizzie and her oldest son, George, who also goes by Gus. Matter of fact, his mother calls him Gus all the time in records. So what kind of records have you seen?
Can I jump in here real quick? When we're talking about the Cherokee Nation, I'm assuming around the 1900s, where are we talking about?
Near Tahlequah in Oklahoma. We are, thank you. We are talking about the Indian Territory in Oklahoma.
We're in Oklahoma.
We are in Oklahoma.
1900?
In 1890 to 1900s. Mm-hmm.
1900. Okay, thank you.
That's a good question.
You're darn right it is. You're darn right it is. I can come up with some good questions.
Well, that's why I love you doing this, John.
I need this for my AAA map, you know.
I see that.
It goes back a ways for sure.
Yes, it does. Okay, sorry. Please continue.
So we know Ellen was married twice. We don't know the name of her first husband. We do know that her first 2 children, though, for sure are the first husbands, even though they used the Carr surname.
Wow.
Carr is probably the only father that they know of, and they may not even know that their mother was married before.
Wow.
Up to this point, I never see anything that defies that they think they're Carrs. So as I'm going through this, you gave me the 4 youngest children's names. What do you know about the 4 youngest children?
So it would be my grandmother, Alberta, and her twin sister, Roberta, and then a brother, Arthur, and then a Jim Carr Jr.
Okay, so where does Luella come in? And I know that's a funny spelling name, so pronounce it for me again.
I think it's Luella, but it's spelled, from what I found, Luweller, Luwheller.
And where do you have Eleanor and Catherine and Maggie?
Catherine, I have it 1919, Maggie 1918.
So there's an issue with the last 4 that you gave me. The problem is they were not mothered by Ellen.
Wow.
They are not Ellen and James Carr's children.
Wow.
They are Ellen's grandchildren.
Huh?
She raised her oldest daughter's children. Her oldest daughter's name was Lizzie from her first husband. Those 4 girls are Musgroves.
Really?
Yes. Lizzie was married to a man by Turner Musgrove.
Right, I'm aware of that.
Wait a minute. Say that again. Lizzie was married to a man named Turner Musgrove. And you knew that, right?
Yes, right.
So, and when I tell Vickie that I need her to go back to the gate, she has to divide her family. There's no reason looking for a great grandmother when we had the families all bled together. Those last 4 are Musgroves. And how do I know that?
Yes. How do you know that, Kathleen?
Because I get paid to do this.
Oh, no.
I know.
Find another answer for that. Why do you know that, Kathleen? How could you possibly know that?
Because there are school records in the Indian Territory.
Wow.
And it tells me that even though Jim and Ellen are enrolling these children, these last 4 have the Musgrove surname.
Wow.
They're in the household. They're raised by their grandparents. Those 4 were Ellen's grandchildren. They're not even Jim's grandchildren.
Well,
Wow.
I'm going to throw out my page of notes now because they're pretty much meaningless at this point.
I am so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Gosh. Okay.
So Ellen and Jim had 7 children together. Ellen had those 2 other older ones and 4 grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
And I have the school records. I do not have them all. I'm going to let you work with school records because what we're here to do is DIY genealogy.
Okay.
And as I mentioned earlier, we will never find Ellen by looking for Ellen.
Okay.
All we know about Ellen are the children she has, the husband she has, the in-laws she has, and the community. So that's where you're going to find the answers.
Okay.
This is becoming a theme. What I've noticed over the last few episodes, it seems that you spend a lot of time not looking for the person you're looking for, but looking for all the people around them. And then you get the information on them. Is that the cluster research that you always talk about?
You are so smart. See, John listens to me, Vickie, and that's why we've been married 25 years.
Nice.
Well, yeah, I don't even think that he's going to listen to me. And right before I'm throwing in the towel, he comes up with something like that.
No, actually,
Nice.
actually, Chewy is passing me notes for questions to ask because I truly don't listen. I'm a man. Listen to my wife, please.
Oh, please.
Let's not be unrealistic. You've got a better chance of finding your grandmother's name.
I want you to also redo anything I'm telling you. I want you to go back to the 1900 census.
Okay.
I want you to see what it says about them being born, George and Lizzie, in 1895 and 1897. But it also tells you, but we've only been married 2 years.
Okay.
When I'm going through all of this, I'm going through, as I said, a census analysis. And you mentioned Arkansas. So I took every year that we had that you gave me from 1900 to 1920. I actually included the 1890 for James. And in 1920, it does say that there's 8 children, 7 living, as I said. It does say Arkansas. However, all the rest of them do say Oklahoma and Indian Territory. We don't know anything about Ellen in general. I'm not sure Ellen knew anything about Ellen. We're talking someone who's born around 1870, 1872. They're moving. We're talking about land runs in Oklahoma, homesteaders, people trying to build Black communities in Oklahoma. Remember, Oklahoma was the one state they thought at one point would be an all-Black state. And there was over 50 communities that were all Black.
Right.
We only hear about a few, but there's so many reasons for people to move there. So could they have come from Arkansas? They could have easily come from the Arkansas, even from the Arkansas Indian Territory. We don't know.
Right.
Because all we know is she's older than her husband. What kind of records have you looked at?
Pretty much census records and of course a lot of Cherokee Nation records as well, applications for enrollment, Dawes roll. I looked at marriage record.
Were there any other records?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
You did mention Dawes Rose, which is one of the great ones to do. But at this time frame, if anything, you'll find them on the reject. I have not researched the rejected, but they will not come up with the regular Dawes Rose.
Yeah.
You can access those mostly through Ancestry. Just Google it and it comes up quicker. If you say the rejected Native American or Indian Territory rolls, just somehow use the word rejected, it will come up for you. And I can also probably send you a link if I can find it. But what we know is that those rolls are possible. The problem is if you're looking through Ellen, what are you looking for?
Right.
So the one way you can't do an earlier one is if you're looking for an Ellen with a George and a Lizzie.
Okay.
And maybe with a lot of searching, you might find that person in the time frame that they were in, because there are those other census records in the Indian Territory.
Right.
So have you taken a DNA test?
I have.
So your DNA test should give you some hints.
Yeah,
But-
it should.
It should. You might have to have a professional DNA analysis. The best DNA test you can get at this point is to test George or Lizzie's descendants and then test yourself to narrow out which one comes from which family line.
Okay.
Because George and Lizzie's descendants are only going to match you on Ellen, the great-grandmother that you're looking for.
Mhm.
They're only going to match you on that line on the female side, and they're not going to match with you at all on the male side.
Interesting.
So did you see how I did that though, Vickie?
I did.
Did you see what I did? Okay, good.
Mhm.
So you're going to hopefully get one of their descendants as well as you have your own, and you probably have some other cousins, but you all are going to match each other on both Jim and Ellen's side, where George shouldn't have any of Jim's side.
Okay.
His
Okay.
descendants. So your DNA analysis, but as I said, you might have to have a professional because we are getting deep in the woods with that DNA analysis.
Sure.
So this is not what we would consider a brick wall yet. You have a lot of work to go to
Okay.
because you need to start back at that gate,
Mhm.
divide the family, and then pull all the birth, death, marriage records that you can possibly pull on all of those kids.
Okay.
Not the Musgroves. We know that they're not going to help you much, but on all the ones that we know Ellen actually birthed.
Okay.
You also will want to look at Social Security applications. They're supposed to name their parents on it. Now, it is possible no one knows her surname. And every time you order that record, it's almost $25.
Right.
But you might want to go through and find out because in this case, that is the only way you're going to find them is through one of those children. It's the only way you're going to find Ellen. And right now we don't even have a hint.
Right.
So the other ways to do it, and I have 10 church records. Every one of those kids were married in a church.
Okay.
I don't know where those church records might be. They might be locally. They might be at the Genealogical Society. They may not exist at all. But this is how we do this kind of research. We have to call everyone and look for everyone whose name shows up anywhere.
Okay.
We have the names of the ministers on their marriage records. And
Okay.
I've seen about 6 of them, I think. Obituaries. The obituaries you're looking at are going to be held probably more locally, not on newspaper archives and newspapers.com,
All right.
but you may wish to engage the Genealogical Society and the local libraries. They might have vertical files or old newspaper clippings or even indices. So that's the second thing. The third one was the death certificates. Fourth is birth certificates. Fifth is the Social Security applications that I mentioned that you have to pay for.
Right.
They might have a few of those online in an index form, but it's the information inside it that you need. You're working from the children to find this mother.
Okay.
6, marriage records. And that's where you'll find the preachers and the ministers. There normally are not family Bibles, but there are midwives.
Is this
Right.
number 7?
Number 7 is family Bible. Yes, family Bibles or midwife records. Number 8 would be the newspapers and any kind of court application that is noted in the newspapers. Now, we didn't see anything with Jim Carr, and I don't know who we is.
I can promise you, I'm not part of that we. Any research you did on this, I was probably watching the Chiefs parade. Yeah, no. You and the mouse in your pocket. You saw that.
And my other personalities. Vickie, I did not find a marriage record, but I really wasn't looking. But if it was done in that area, it was probably published somewhere, even though they're African American, if they actually went to the court. There might have been a court recorder. It's just that it's a little early, and they didn't have to actually record anything in 1899 or 1898. So again, we'll go back to the children. We're still on number 8. Newspaper and
Gotcha.
marriage
Thank
and
you.
court applications.
Thank you.
So the children's marriages, however, their applications might have named a parent. Now I saw some and she just says her married name of Carr, which brings me to a very strange one. Her maiden name might have been Carr. We don't know where the Carr name came from.
True.
Well, we do know who Rachel married. We just know nothing about that family.
Right.
So you'll also have to flesh out Rachel, the mother mother of Jim, you'll need to flesh out her family and her husband, who also died before 1890, or he's gone before 1890. He is not in the house with the Beans and the Vans and somebody named Johnson or Robinson. Yes.
Yeah, there's a
But in the 1890 census is a big hint because they're married about 8 years later. And we don't know what Jim did those 8 years from 1890 to 1898. What is interesting, though, is the number 9 is all about land.
Okay.
Jim owns land. It's on the 1900 census that he owns that farm. You'll want to see where he got that farm from. Was it left to him? Is there a deed on it? Is his wife's name on that? That will be in the Oklahoma court records. At least it should be. It may, because it's early enough, might be in Texas with the land division of the land runs and all of that. And Texas meaning the National Archives in Texas.
Right.
Number 10, you already touched on that one. That was the Native American rolls. And as I said, be sure to check the rejected ones.
Okay.
I do see them already on the, what's the word? I can't think of the word. I'll come back to it. The other, I'll think of it. And I didn't even mention divorce records. Okay. I don't think they got a divorce because I don't think Ellen was married in the first place. I mean, she might have been married, but we don't know who she was married to.
Right.
But that's one of the other ways that we normally would find them. In this case, I don't think that applies to you. So any questions on those 10 that I mentioned?
No, I just had a thought about, in the past, I thought I should try to follow the kids too, but I just had a hard time finding any of them, really. I mean, my grandmother, of course, I knew, and I knew her twin sister and a couple of the other siblings, like Lizzie. I knew of great Aunt Lizzie, but I never thought that, there was a division in the family as far as different dads for the kids and grandkids. And
So when you're doing this kind of research, especially in African-American history or genealogy, to tell you the truth, it applies to everyone. You cannot leave anything unturned.
Okay.
Because of the way the family records are in the courthouses, the way the family records were or were not recorded. There is, I'm going to have to stop, John, just for a second. Let me just see if I can find.
Vickie, this is not good. This is the first time we've actually been in trouble.
We're not in trouble.
I didn't think so.
We're not anything we can't edit out. But, we're out of time now. We're so glad you.
No, stop. Oh, no, I can't think of this word. And it's driving me crazy, Vickie.
Are you talking about intruder?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
There you go.
I kept saying you're not supposed to be there. How did you?
I've seen some intruder rolls.
Oh, okay. So there's a Native American intruder roll?
Yes. And that just means you don't belong to that particular tribe. You're not legally living there. And James Carr had one. Yes.
Well done, Vickie.
Thank you, Vickie, for bailing me out.
Thank you.
The intruder roll is the 1890 roll that James Carr is on, but there's a lot of others over those years. Now, remember, every state doesn't have a salvaged 1890 census record.
Right.
Whereas Oklahoma does.
Yay.
And so, exactly. So you'll really want to look at that. But again, don't waste your time looking for Ellen, unless for some reason there's one that says 1898, and there's a Lizzie and a George with her. Now, if you have no questions for me, I just want to go over some next steps. Okay, so the first one is separate that family from the Carrs and from the Musgroves. The second is be sure to check out the school records, church records, which we talked about. Now, one of the things I found very interesting is a Rhoda Kramer. And this is what you're going to be doing also. You're going to pull out those marriage records of those kids. Now, I don't know what your grandmother's name was. Was it Alberta or Alberta with an L?
Alberta, Alberta.
Don't be attached to that because I see it a lot of times Arberta.
Okay.
But she was married to Henry Van. She's the daughter of our Ellen. And so I looked at that marriage record that you sent me. Well, she has some association with a person named Rhodey Kramer, who signed that record from Arkansas.
Okay.
She had a minister named Lee Pugh. We need to look up Lee Pugh's records because he signed more than one of your family members' marriage records.
Wow.
And then there's Reed Barker. I have no idea who he is, but you want to look at that. So as John mentioned earlier, that's what we mean by cluster. We don't know where James is between 1890 and 1900. He has that land by the age of 24. Where did he get it from? That might tell you where he was when he married Ellen or met Ellen. Then I also mentioned the DNA from George or Gus's descendants. And Ellen, by the way, she uses the name Gus in almost all of his school records. The other part is we talked about the rejected. We want to make sure you're looking at that. You've seen some, and one of the rejected Native American Indian Territory roles that we see was for Rachel Bean and her husband, Ninus Carr.
Yes.
And you'll want to pull that. And it goes all the way back to Cosby, who was Jim Carr's grandmother, is a woman who's married to a man by the name of John Bean.
Yes.
There's a lot on her. She lived through the Civil War. She talked about it. She was interviewed for it. Have you seen those the interview?
I have seen some of her interviews on the, I think it was the Pioneers of Oklahoma.
Oh, it might be. I didn't see that one. So yes, unscrambling that family on the rejected will take time.
Yes.
So I am going to reinforce one rule for you.
Okay.
Patience. Don't give up and have a plan. If I were asking myself the very simple question of what is my great-grandmother's maiden name, my next question is, what record sets will answer my question for me? Okay. And that's why those church and obituaries and death and birth of the children, all of that is so important. Those 10 that I mentioned. I know that you mentioned someone that might be this Ellen Hargrove or someone that is not cited. It's almost like someone picked an apple from a tree and decided this was the best one on the tree. But it might be a reason I just didn't see one because we haven't exhausted the Indian Territory yet. Mr. Funny Guy is going to have something to say about this, but I'm going to tell you my own issue with my Indian Territory family.
Okay.
We could not find a lot of them. We know they were there. I can see where they lived there. I can see the land. I can see newspaper articles. They were in census records, but I couldn't find them or their information at a certain point. They were all in Osawatomie, Kansas. It's part of Osage and Potawatomi, so it's actually Osawatomie, but we say Osawatomie here in Kansas City. They also have an insane asylum. I always say we're in the East Wing.
Yeah. Well, believe me, I probably have some there too.
And so every time someone disappears from Oklahoma, I call to the State Archives of Kansas, which is in Topeka, who has the cards now. And in my case, literally over a half dozen of our family members are there.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, even fathers and daughters. So don't rule out some of the odd things that could have happened because we see her nowhere in a cemetery. We see her nowhere named as deceased. And it would have been somewhere between 1920 and 30, I believe.
Right.
Because he's widowed in 30. Anything else, John, that I am missing?
Well, I don't think so. I think you've got a great list. And Vickie seems so familiar with some of the things you were saying that I don't think she's going to have too much trouble. This should be done by tomorrow afternoon. Yeah, Vickie?
Fingers crossed. It's going to be a late night. Kathleen, I did have a question.
Oh, go for it.
I just wondered, like with the research plan, I've heard, that I should have a research plan. And I'm usually here and there when I'm researching. Unfortunately, so where should I start with the research plan?
I would suggest a book called Professional Genealogy. It's by Elizabeth Schoen Mills. And she gives a great basic on how to create a research plan and why we have it. There are probably other things online, but normally we learn it through conferences or the Elizabeth Schoen Mills Professional Genealogy book.
Okay.
And you can get that probably through your library or through a library loan or a half-price bookstore.
Okay, great.
But it's a good book.
Okay.
Okay, so Vickie, I hope you know about the OK2 Explore website.
I
the
have seen that. Yes.
It's a great place to quickly see if you can find birth and death records.
Okay.
I like the way it actually indexes them so that you can kind of have a quick glance before trying to tackle in one of the databases.
Wow.
The school records are on Family Search. They might be on Ancestry. I just use Family Search. I know they're there.
Well,
this was a fun project. And
I know you're going to post
what we discussed.
Those 10.
Yes, I will post the 10 on the podcast notes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Well, this has been so enlightening to me. I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you, Vickie. I mean, it's been a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun looking at this. Actually, I kind of got a little obsessed. I'm not supposed to be solving issues, but
She can't help herself.
when I realized I can't.
Well, thank you, Vickie. It's wonderful to have you stop by. We really appreciate it. And a great question.
Thank you so much, John. And Kathleen, I sure appreciate your help.
You're very welcome.
Well, okay, let us know how it goes.
Yes, definitely the updates.
I definitely
the
will.
updates.
Thank
Great.
you.
Well, thanks. Enjoy.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, congratulations. You've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for staying. Thanks to Vickie from Snowflake, Arizona for spending some time with us. Thanks to Chewy Chewbacca Brandt, our part-time segment producer and full-time jabroni, for his unwavering lack of interest in anything we're doing. The theme song for Hittin' the Bricks was written and performed by Tony Fistknuckle and the Aphids. Watch for their next appearance at the Ticonderoga Discount Bait and Stationery Shop. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and of course Buzzsprout. We'd love to hear what you think about the podcast, so stop by our Facebook page at Hittin' the Bricks. And how about those Chiefs?